Dr. Garfinkel, is going to talk to us this afternoon about music and emotion processing, insights from the brain.
Great, thank you so much. So we know that music is very much linked to emotion, and we know this from research, and we know this from our own experience. And if you look at why people principally listen to music, then it's for its hedonic properties, that is, its ability to convey pleasure, its aesthetic properties, we find it beautiful, and its affective properties, that is, it can help influence our emotional state. And we've long known that and exploited it in psychology studies, one of which Ryan has so beautifully talked about today, that we can play music to people to induce different emotional states, and then we can use those emotional states to see how they affect other things, such as attention and memory processes. So it's long been exploited by psychologists, but it's only in more recent years that it's been actually investigated in itself to see how music itself activates the brain. And that music can powerfully activate different emotion circuitry within the brain. And one area in particular is the amygdala, and we know that's a hub of emotional activity. It's often involved in fear processing, but it can also be involved in other positive emotion processing as well. And if we look at patients with lesions in this specific area, so that area is no longer present or functioning, then we can see that often the emotional qualities of music have been stripped away. So if you play people different music in different categories, such as scary, peaceful, happy and sad, they're less able to recognise these emotional qualities in the music, and they'll rate it as less on these scales. And this is particularly true and significant for the very negative, sort of scary qualities of music, where you also gave us an example earlier. But it also occurs significantly in the peaceful conditions, so they find less peace in music as well if they have this region not present. But we also know that music has this amazing capacity to give us rewards, and we feel that ourselves when we listen to music that we like, but we can also see that in the brain. If we scan people while they're listening to music which they like and they find rewarding, we get very dramatic activation of this ventral striatum area, which is an area that's involved in hedonic reward. So think about what you like most in the world, and I promise you if we scan your brain at that point, that area will light up. So it's involved in a whole host of sort of different rewarding type properties and stimuli, and music is one of those things that can also induce activation of that area. But music and its effect on the brain also interacts in a very interesting way with vision. So the nature and extent of activation in the brain interacts with whether your eyes are open or closed, and you can have this propensity for greater activation in emotion circuitry if your eyes are closed relative to open, and that's particularly true for negative, doesn't occur for neutral, but you also get this enhanced activation in emotion circuitry also for positive as well. So if you want to really sort of enhance those positive circuits in the brain with music, then do try closing your eyes, as we really do know that has a neural effect in the brain. But this paper was released just a few weeks ago, which, although it's got quite a silly title, is quite an elegant paper in that it's looking at how the way in which movies will attach soundtracks, conveying sort of positive or negative emotions to particularly poignant scenes, such as kisses or other dramatic events. And what it's saying is the presence of music doesn't just have an additive effect in the brain, so it doesn't just make some areas light up more. What it can actually do is gate, we use the word gate in the sense that it influences the degree of visual information which is processed. So music activates an area of the brain called the superior temporal gyrus, and this can act as a gate, which then dictates how much visual area from the fusiform gyrus flows into the amygdala, and then this can then alter the emotional qualities of the kiss or whatever it is you're watching. So you can actually have more visual information hitting the emotion centres in the presence of music. But even though I'm a neuroscientist, my work, as well as dealing in functional neuroimaging of emotion, also details the way in which emotions are expressed in our bodies, because we know that our bodies can also signal and reflect emotional states, and our bodies can feed back into our brains. And the sort of stuff that we do in my lab is that we look at emotion and how it's reflected in the eyes, so our pupils will change in terms of the dilation with emotional states. Our blood pressure can also change with emotion, and also emotions can be felt in terms of heat maps in the body, with anger being associated with more positive, like warm heat, and things like sadness being associated with a depletion of heat in certain areas. And the heart is also a wonderful conveyor of emotion. It has this propensity to have beautiful acceleration and de-acceleration patterns with emotion. So we know that music can affect emotion, it can affect the brain, but it can also affect the body. And so in terms of emotional states being affected in our body, can you see anything different? Maybe it's too small here, but there's something different about these three pictures. So what's actually happening is they've manipulated the size of the pupils. So these pupils are largest, they're 167%, and these pupils are smallest, so 60%. But what you can do is you can show people these faces, and they will judge, without knowing that the eye is smaller, these ones are sadder, because when you're sad, your pupils get smaller. So this is an illustration of bodily states being expressed in the body. But what's so interesting about this is that people that were looking at these images, their pupils also got sadder. So they embodied the emotional state of the others by also having this smaller pupil size. So emotions can be expressed in our body, and we can also express other people's emotions in our bodies as well. And this seems to underlie some sort of empathy response of feeling other people's emotions in your own bodily states. But what's interesting about this from a music perspective is that music can also change your bodily rhythms and your bodily patterns. So we know that music has this ability to entrain biological oscillators, such as respiratory patterns and also the heart. So this is influenced by a number of things, such as tempo, but it does mean that when listening to music, your bodily state will start to align in some way, in terms of respiratory and cardiac patterns, with music. And there was a really nice paper that came out in 2011, which is looking at collective synchronization of bodily patterns in this case it was choir boys, but it's been done in other choirs as well. And they were able to show this coherence of respiratory patterns and also cardiac patterns in the choir. And then in a separate line of research, if you interview people who are in choirs, they tend to feel this great sense of well-being and this connection. And you can hypothesize, when sort of linking it with this mirroring of other people's states, that actually this propensity to have your bodies become in line and cohere with those around you sort of helps enhance this collective sense of togetherness and enhance people's individual feelings of well-being. So with that, I hope that when you listen to music, you can not only enjoy the music itself, but also enjoy the fact that your body is syncing with those people around you. Thank you so much.